Celtic Reconstructionist Paganism is a polytheistic reconstructionist approach to Celtic neopaganism, emphasizing historical accuracy over eclecticism such as is found in many forms of Neo-druidism. It is an effort to reconstruct and revive in a modern Celtic cultural context pre-Christian Celtic religions. Celtic Reconstructionist paganism originated in discussions among amateur scholars and neopagans in the mid-1980s, and evolved into an independent tradition by the early 1990s. Currently, Celtic Reconstructionist paganism is an umbrella term, with a number of recognized sub-traditions and denominations. Origins. As modern paganism grew in scope and cultural visibility, some Americans of European heritage saw the pre-Christian religions of their ancestors as being worthy of revival, and the study of mythology and folklore as a way to accomplish this, while most Neo-Druid groups of the period were primarily interested in revitalizing the spirit of what they believe was the religious practice of pre-Roman Britain. The Celtic Reconstructionists focused on only reconstructing what can be known from the extant historical record. Many of the people who eventually established CR were involved in modern pagan groups in the 1970s and 1980s. Much dialogue in the 1980s took place at workshops and discussions at pagan festivals and gatherings, as well as in the pages of pagan publications. This period and these groups are referred to in retrospect as Proto-CR. Later, with the establishment of the Internet in the late 1980s and early 1990s, many of these groups and individuals came together online. This began a period of increased communication and led to the growth of the movement. The first appearance in print of the term Celtic Reconstructionist, used to describe a specific religious movement and not just a style of Celtic studies, was by Kim Lambert Nedoiran in the spring 1992 issue of Harvest magazine. Nedoiran credits Catherine Price Nickdana with originating the term Celtic Reconstructionist. However, Nickdana credits her early use of the term to a simple extrapolation of Margot Adler's use of the term pagan reconstructionists in the original 1979 edition of Drawing Down the Moon. Though Adler devotes space to a handful of reconstructionist traditions, none of those mentioned are specifically Celtic. In Chapter 11, while describing his Neo-Druidic group, New Reformed Druids of North America, Isaac Bonewitz uses the phrase eclectic reconstructionist. Eventually, this pairing of terms became oxymoronic in the pagan polytheist communities. Reconstructionist had now come to mean traditions that specifically exclude eclecticism. With the growth of the Internet during the 1990s, hundreds of individuals and groups gradually joined the discussions online and in print, and the movement became more of an umbrella group with a number of recognized sub-traditions, practices. While the ancient Celtic religions were largely subsumed by Christianity, many religious traditions have survived in the form of folklore, mythology, songs, and prayers. Many folkloric practices never completely died out, and some Celtic Reconstructionists claim to have survivals of Irish, Scottish and Welsh folkloric customs in the families of origin. Language study and preservation, and participation in other cultural activities such as Celtic music, dance and martial arts forms, are seen as a core part of the tradition. Participation in the living Celtic cultures, the cultures that exist in the areas in which Celtic languages are actually spoken and in which Celtic traditions have been most faithfully handed down to the present day, is a vital part of the cultural work and spiritual practice. The protection of Celtic archaeological and sacred sites is important to Celtic Reconstructionists. When construction of the N3 motorway in Ireland threatened to destroy archaeological sites around the Hill of Tara, Celtic Reconstructionists organized protests and a coordinated ritual of protection. Like many other modern pagan traditions. Celtic Reconstructionism has no sacred texts and so personal research is stressed. In order to more fully reconstruct pre-Christian Celtic religions, many CRs study archaeology, historical manuscripts, and comparative religion, primarily of Celtic cultures, but sometimes other European cultures as well. Celtic Reconstructionists are not pan-Celtic in practice, but rather immerse themselves in a particular Celtic culture such as Gaelic, Welsh or Gaulish. According to Catherine Price Nickdana, CRs believe that while it is helpful to study a wide variety of Celtic cultures as an aid to religious reconstruction, and to have a broad understanding of religion in general, in practice these cultures are not lumped together. In addition to cultural preservation and scholarly research, Celtic Reconstructionists believe that mystical, ecstatic practices are unnecessarily balanced to scholarship, and that this balance is a vital component of any Celtic Reconstructionist tradition. While CRs strive to revive the religious practices of historical Celtic peoples as accurately as possible, they acknowledge that some aspects of the religious practice are reconstructions. Celtic Reconstructionists state that the practices are based on cultural survivals, augmented with the study of early Celtic beliefs found in texts and the work of scholars and archaeologists. Feedback from scholars and experienced practitioners is sought before a new practice is accepted as a valid part of a reconstructed tradition. Celtic Reconstructionists believe it is important to lay aside elements of ancient Celtic cultures which they consider inappropriate practices in a modern society. CRs attempt to find ethical ways of integrating historical findings and research with the activities of daily life. Many CRs view each act of daily life as a form of ritual, accompanying daily acts of purification and protection with traditional prayers and songs from sources such as the Scottish Gaelic Carmina Gadelica, or manuscript collections of ancient Irish or Welsh poetry. Celebratory, community rituals are usually based on community festivals as recorded in folklore collections by authors such as F. Marion McNeill, Kevin Danaher or John Gregorson Campbell. These celebrations often involve bonfires, dances, songs, divination and children's games. More formal or mystical rituals are often based on traditional techniques of interacting with the other world, such as the act of making offerings of food, drink and art to the spirits of the land, ancestral spirits, and the Celtic deities. CRs give offerings to the spirits throughout the year, but it's Samhain. More elaborate offerings are made to specific deities and ancestors. The ancient Irish swore their oaths by the three realms, land, sea and sky. Based on this precedent, reconstructed Gaelic ritual structures acknowledge the land, sea and sky, with the fire of inspiration as a central force that unites the realms. Many Celtic Reconstructionists maintain altars and shrines to their patron spirits and deities, often choosing to place them at outdoor, natural locations such as wells, streams, and special trees. Some CRs practice divination, often as a favored method, as a folkloric custom such as the taking of omens from the shapes of clouds of the behavior of birds and animals. Movements labels. Overall tradition. Nickdana and Nedoiran have stated that they coined the term Celtic Reconstructionist Celtic Reconstructionism specifically to distinguish the practices and beliefs from those of eclectic traditions like Wicca and Neo-druidism. With Nedoiran's popularization of Celtic Reconstructionism in the Neopagan press and then the use of the term by these individuals and others on the Internet, Celtic Reconstructionism began to be adopted as the name for this developing spiritual tradition. Gaelic Traditionalism. Some groups that take a Celtic Reconstructionist approach to ancient Gaelic polytheism call themselves Gaelic Traditionalists. Preservation of the living traditions in modern Gaelic communities has always been a priority in Celtic Reconstructionism. However, according to the CR there has been some controversy around the use of the term Gaelic Traditionalists by groups outside of the Gaeltacht and Gaeltacht areas of Ireland, Scotland and Nova Scotia. In the opinion of Isaac Bonewitz, this is partly because Gaelic Traditionalists is a term used almost exclusively by Celtic Christians. As Kim Lambert Nedoiran put it, Gaelic Traditionalists means those living and raised in the living cultures and keeping the culture, language and music alive, not any of the American polytheistic groups that have been using it lately. The CR states that due to those in the Gaelic-speaking areas having a prior claim to the term, most Reconstructionists have been uncomfortable with the choice of other Reconstructionists to call themselves Traditionalists, a sentiment which Bonewitz echoes. According to the authors of the CR, while the disagreement over terminology has at times led to heated discussion, the polytheistic Traditionalists and Reconstructionists are taking the same approach to the religion, and there are generally good relations between the founders of both movements. Sub-traditions. While Celtic Reconstructionism was the earliest term in use and still remains the most widespread, as the movement progressed, other names for a Celtic Reconstructionist approach were also popularized, with varying degrees of success. Some CI groups have looked to the individual Celtic languages for a more culturally specific name for the tradition, or for the branch of the tradition. Paganacht. Some Gaelic-oriented groups have used the Scottish Gaelic Paganacht or the Irish version Paganacht. One Gaelic polytheist group on the east coast of the U.S. has used a modification of the Gaelic term as Paganacht Bandia, Sinistrognath. In 2000, IMBAS, a Celtic Reconstructionist organization based in Seattle active during the late 1990s to early 2000s, adopted the name Sinistrognath, a constructed Old Celtic term intended as translating to ancestral customs. Imbas is an Old Irish word meaning poetic inspiration. The organization promotes the spiritual path of Sinistrognath, the ancestral customs of the Celtic peoples. It is a path open to pagans, Christians, and agnostics alike. Others. The Irish word for polytheism, Ildiachas, is in use by at least one group on the west coast of the U.S. as Ildiachas Atogtha. Celtic Reconstructionism and Neo-druidism. Though there has been cross-pollination between Neo-druid and Celtic Reconstructionist groups, and there is significant crossover of membership between the two movements, the two have largely differing goals and methodologies in their approach to Celtic religious forms. Reconstructionists tend to place high priority on historical authenticity and traditional practice. Some Neo-Druids tend to prefer a modern pagan eclectic approach, focusing on the spirit of what they believe was the religious practice of pre-Roman Britain. However, some Neo-Druid groups, the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids, and the Henge of Celtria, adopted similar methodologies of reconstruction, at least some of the time. ADF, in particular, has long used reconstructionist techniques, but the group has been criticized for the pan-Indo-European scope, which may result in non-Celtic combinations such as Vedic Druids and Roman Druids. Terminological differences exist as well, especially in terms of what Druid means. Some Neo-Druid groups call anyone with an interest in Celtic spirituality a Druid, and refer to the practice of any Celtic-inspired spirituality as Druidry, while Reconstructionists Traditionalist groups usually use the older definition, seeing Druid as a culturally specific office that requires decades of training and experience, which is only attained by a small number of practitioners, and which must be conferred and confirmed by the community the Druid serves.